Hello, and welcome back to the Nourish with Purpose podcast. I hope you're having a great Wednesday or whenever you're listening to today's episode. I have to be transparent. I honestly recorded almost a full episode and absolutely hated it. So I scrapped that and we're starting new because it really just did not translate how I wanted it to. And there's nothing worse than just not being proud of something that you put out, or at least for me, I'm very perfectionistic, and if I don't love something, it honestly just makes me embarrassed. So we're starting fresh, but I hope you're doing well. I wanted to remind you about the giveaway that I'm drawing for on July 21st, which, yes, I know you have plenty of time, but I'm giving away a $100 gift card to the grocery store of your choice. This is really, I guess I should say, how you can get entered. So you can get entered by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. I really, really appreciate your support. And if you're a frequent listener, I want to hear from you and I want to hear about what you're loving from the podcast and really how it's helped you. Hopefully, that's obviously my goal with everything that I put out, is I just hope you find it supportive and encouraging. So let me know, write that review, screenshot it, send it my way through Instagram, text, Facebook, really any way that you know how to reach me. And I will get you entered into that giveaway. Again, a $100 gift card, any grocery store you want. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's jump into the catch up for this last week. I really think I should almost start a Farm Chronicles section of the podcast because that's about every update you're going to be getting for the entire summer. We got 150 baby chicks. Maybe you saw that over on my Instagram. They're the cutest little things. I had my friend Delaney out onto our farm on Sunday, and we discovered that if you lay these little chicks on their back and you just scratch their stomachs, they just are in awe. They just fall asleep and they're so content and calm. It was honestly hilarious. But they are just so fun. They're so fun to watch. I really, when you see those birds in the sky and they all kind of flock and they're moving in the same motion, I'm always so mesmerized by that. And I'm like, surely there's no way chickens are like that because they're honestly kind of really dumb. But when you open the door, they all just scatter into the same spot. Or if one goes towards the food, they all just follow. It's really just funny to watch them. They are very entertaining. Outside of that, our ducks finally explored the kiddie pool. This is a big moment because I've been waiting to just see them splash around and enjoy that kiddie pool, because if you haven't listened to the episode where I talk about getting the ducks, which is probably 4 weeks ago, when I was on my way to go get them from Tractor Supply, I saw a kiddie pool in the ditch and I was like, this is such a sign that I need to go get ducks. So I lugged it into my trunk and that's the kiddie pool that they are using and loving. It's just so fun to see them out there splashing around, and I don't know, it's just they're very entertaining. They're kind of very scared of humans, which I would be too if I was small and this large human was walking at me. So I'm trying to work on how I can maybe train them a little bit more. I don't know. I'm sure I'll keep you updated on that, but they are fun and they're funny to watch too. Outside of that, going to be getting my garden, kind of my floral. I'm doing cut flowers, which you've probably heard a bazillion times. I keep talking about it, but not actually doing anything. But I'm laying out the tarps. My dad, because it's been raining here, he hasn't been able to be in the field planting, and so he's going to help me lay out those tarps and hopefully get it ready to transplant all the flowers I've been growing in my basement, the hundreds of flowers actually growing in my basement. But I have to give a shout out to my mom because apparently I talk about my dad and praise him a little too much on the podcast. So Mom, if you're listening, she is just always doing things to make my life easier, and I think sometimes that's what goes the most unnoticed. So of course I wanted to mention she brought us or made us supper last night. It was a pasta bake with the protein pasta, the red lentil pasta, and dairy-free cheese, hamburger. It was delicious, and things like that make me so grateful to live where we do. We're 2 miles from my parents' house, and it's just so nice to honestly have somebody make supper for you, even though I was very capable of doing it yesterday because I didn't really have a lot going on due to the stormy weather. exercise class got canceled. And so anyway, it was just nice to not have to think about what I was going to make. So I very much appreciated that and just wanted to put it out there that she does so many things for me that I probably don't give her enough credit for. Outside of that, how I'm nourishing my mind, body, and spirit, how I'm really nourishing my body right now is paying attention to my cycle. This is something I discussed in the Inflamed to Inspired hybrid program that I ran for the last 8 weeks. We just wrapped up this last week, which honestly makes me so sad. I hate when I end my time with clients or with groups, but I will have my next round starting on June 18 if all goes as planned. But in that group, we talk about the hormonal system, and during that week, we talk about how you can actually manage your exercise habits and your eating habits with your cycle, or kind of align the two. And for me this last week, I've been just wanting so much protein and starchy carbs. Like I could just eat that forever and ever. Anything chocolatey. And I made some really gooey, delicious brownies that I posted on my Instagram. And I just have been craving that source of food, just so much protein. Like I could just eat that, like a big old steak or some Italian sausage, and I would be so content. And it's really interesting because when you recognize, like, so I'm in my luteal phase, and meaning I'm going to be getting my period this next week. And it's just so cool when you have an understanding for why your body is craving something. Like for me, I was making lunch yesterday and I had some fresh cut watermelon, and nothing sounded more disgusting to me than raw fruit, in all honesty, or raw vegetables. Like just sounded so gross. So I did the leftover steak and then some homemade French fries, and that was my lunch. And was it a core 4? No, because I was missing the fiber in the form of a fruit or vegetable, if you know what I'm talking about. But at the same time, that's what my body wanted. And I'm like, if my body's kind of repulsing something or repulsed by something, why would I force myself to eat it? And so, it's that fine balance of making sure you're properly nourishing your body, which I truly think I was. I was eating great food. It was all very high quality and satisfied what I needed it to. But just knowing that, okay, I'm in that phase. I don't need to force myself to eat any raw fruits or vegetables because my body is trying to store up energy. Your luteal phase, you have very low energy, whereas like your follicular phase and ovulatory phase, you maybe have a little bit more, for sure follicular, which is that week after your period. But for me, just recognizing, okay, my body's exhausted. Honestly, like yesterday when I got back from leading the 5:45 a.m. exercise class, I took a 2-hour nap from like 7:45 to 9:45 a.m. And I never, ever do that. I am not a nap taker. But even when I got up at 9:45 in the morning for the second time, I had to drag myself off the couch. And I was just kind of one of those weeks where you do so much, and not even weeks. Gosh, what am I talking about? It's only Wednesday, Tuesday when I'm recording, Wednesday when you're listening. But I have just been so shot. And so it's recognizing that and then not forcing myself to power through a super high intensity workout or go for a run, or not allowing myself to sleep a little bit more when I know I need to. I just really have loved having that connection. And I think that's helping a lot with my mindset too, because it's not just me wondering why I'm being so quote lazy, even though it's not lazy, but being less productive or more, again, lazy. It's not lazy, I know that, but it kind of feels that way. I don't have to wonder why, because I know why my body's responding that way. And that has just been really cool, and something, again, we talk about in Inflamed to Inspired, and we talk about the foods that you can eat to support your body during that cycle, which helps a lot with that hormonal and blood sugar inflammation, or system inflammation, which you might know inflammation shows up in 7 different areas, and those are the 2 that we cover. Throughout that whole program, we touched on every single area in the different habits and lifestyle changes and action plans that we could add in for that week, and more specifically, the foods that support you, the herbs and the supplements that support you. And we did such a deep dive. If that's something you're like, oh, whoa, that's interesting, I do have the link to the waitlist in the description of today's episode. Not to plug that, but honestly, if you are thinking that sounds intriguing, I would highly, highly recommend, because even that just like little piece of the program has changed how I view my cycle and my body during different times of the month, which is really something that I didn't pay any attention to before deep diving into that system. So all that to say, it's been huge for me, honestly, game changing. How I am nourishing my spirit, and I talked about this last week, but doing, I think it's Mimi Bouchard, I believe I talked about this, her 15-minute walking, what is it called? Activation. And so what you do is like you go for a walk and it's just like this inspirational music, and it like starts very calm and it builds up the intensity, and it just makes me feel so much better about myself and my life. It really makes me understand. And there's something she says in the activation, which I like in activation, because it's not like, okay, sit down and meditate for 15 minutes, because as somebody who's a busybody, that is really hard for me to do, which I do a fine time sitting in silence, but I know as soon as I start meditating, my brain is going in 600 different directions. So in activation, you're actively moving your body, but in there she says you are in the exact place that you need to be for, and I'm obviously now I can't even remember or say it correctly, but basically you are right where you need to be for whatever it is that's meant for you to happen. And I think sometimes we make that excuse, or I make that excuse for myself of, oh, if I lived on the coast, it would be so much easier to help people get healthy because they would actually care about their body and their health. And that's not to say that you don't, or that people in the Midwest don't, but traditionally a lot of the things start on the coast and then they work their way in. Even with like leading exercise classes, it's like, oh, if I lived on the coast, that could be my sole job, because there would be enough people that would want to move their body. It's not to say people here don't want to move their body, but it's just different. Or maybe in my mind, it's always been different, but just recognizing like, that's not even true. Like there are women that want to show up and move their bodies right where I am. And that can be a piece of my business. There are people around here that maybe don't know a lot about health and nutrition and holistic health and functional medicine that I get the opportunity to work with and encourage and support. And it just creates that shift of my mindset of like, okay, I need to be in this location for this to happen, when in reality, like it could happen right where I am. And it also has just been a way for me to stop making excuses for myself, really. And it's really helped my spirit, because I know I've talked about my mindset and how I'm working on improving that. And I recognize saying that it's in a really turd place is not improving my mindset. And I'm not really there anymore, I would say. I'm feeling pretty good this week, and it's just an uplifting exercise for me. There was this time I was doing it last week, and for me, any activation or meditation I do is deeply connected with prayer and connecting to a higher power, which I view as God. And so that's how I view this activation. For other people, it might look differently. For me, it's that connection to God. But I was walking, and just as soon as like the music was picking up and getting more intense, the clouds started to part and the sun just like shone on me. It was so bizarre, but it was just the coolest experience. And I'm like, that is so true. Like I'm using this activation to help myself get through what it is that I feel like I've kind of been going through the last few weeks. And it was just that direct reflection of like, God is literally right there to guide me along the way, and that his presence was just so made known in that moment. It was just really neat. And so I've really been loving that. All right, I guess we should jump into the bulk of today's episode, and I am talking about movement, and more specifically, what you can do to make a movement or a workout routine work for you. Because what works for me isn't going to work for you, most likely. But I wanted to first give you a brief history of my own experience with exercise. I would say that when I was younger, thinking like pre-junior high, it was really hard for me to have any desire to move my body. I remember my dad would want me to go out for runs with him, and it was just such a dreaded experience. I hated it. I would act like I was running and really be walking with my feet like kicking my butt. So if he was way behind me or way ahead of me and he looked back, it would be like, oh, look, she's running. When really like I was mimicking running, but just walking. Like I really didn't like it. Wasn't fun for me. Wasn't enjoyable. But But I think this really changed when I got into high school and I started weight training. Well, that was more so junior high, but also into high school. And I really loved weight training, especially because it's very empowering to see your body get so much stronger from one summer to the end of summer, which is what happened every year. Like being able to squat 400 pounds, being able to deadlift. I don't even remember what my number was. It doesn't matter. But just being able to have those goals and like actually reach them was just really cool. And that's where I kind of started craving exercise. As I got to college, I found my friend Katie. And I think something that maybe initially connected us is that we both wanted to stay consistent with exercise. And so we were workout partners for a while. Then school kind of caught up with us, and I would maybe go more on my own just because she would get busy with class or our schedules just didn't align. But it was really nice to have her in my life to at least jumpstart exercising in college. And I exercised that whole summer before college. I remember my mom and I did that Lift 4 by Beachbody, and I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed how I felt and looked by doing that program. And just continue that through college. I know then in college, I gained weight. I started to have that chronic low back pain, and working out was miserable. Honestly, I would force myself to go, felt terrible at this time. I even had an exercise or kind of like workout coach that I met with virtually, and she designed a program for me, and I really thought it would help because she had some low back pain herself. But every exercise she gave me just really hurt my body. And I tried to communicate that with her, and I don't really know if it was ever received. And so working out just became something I had to force myself to do. At this time, though, I did kind of get into running. That's actually initially how Nate and I connected. We were friends for a while, and as we started to talk and just kind of Snapchat all day, every day, I was like, hey, you should go for a run with me because I don't want to run by myself. And so the first kind of date, I guess in a sense, we had was actually running at Wesleyan together. And that was kind of something we just started doing pretty consistently. Wasn't all the time. Eventually we're like, why are we running? Let's just hang out and watch Grey's Anatomy or something. And so then that again kind of changed, but I've always been pretty consistent. I would say when this relationship with exercise got a little extreme, I guess I should backtrack. COVID then, sophomore year of college, sent me home, and that's when I did those Chloe Ting workouts. If you remember that was like the thick of COVID. I would do the same 2 workouts every single day. I think it was like a 20-minute full body toning workout and then a 10-minute total core workout where it was supposed to just guaranteed to give you abs. And Chloe Ting was built just perfectly and had abs already, and I honestly don't know if it was her workouts that really made much of a difference, but what it did do is it got me to move my body consistently in a pretty healthy way, I would say. It was like 30 minutes a day plus walking, and I did that, and then throughout that summer I lost maybe around 12 to 15 pounds. I know I've talked about my eating issues during this time as well, so take that into account. But I really just found a way to move my body that felt good, even with the pain that I was experiencing. I actually noticed my core get a lot stronger and my back pain severely minimalized. And then I moved into an apartment with some friends, and that's when I started to abuse exercise. I was working out 7 days a week for about an hour and a half. I would do the Sydney Cummings workouts. She usually did these series, and I don't know if she still does them, but I would do them. They're about 45 to 60-minute workouts every single day, even if it was a scheduled rest day. And then I would walk for another 30 minutes on top of that. And that became my routine. I became very rigid and consistent with that, and honestly abused my body way more than I should have. I really craved exercise because I noticed even that summer when I had lost the weight, I felt so much better about myself. My clothes were loose, which is something, I had all these clothes that didn't fit me anymore when I gained weight my freshman to sophomore year of college. And then when I finally lost weight, it was like, oh my gosh, I want this to continue. Like I could never be small enough. And that's something that I just kind of told myself pretty frequently. And so, yeah, working out was just very abused, I would say. And through that, I lost another 15-ish pounds. And again, the weight doesn't matter, but I think exercise, there's so much more contributing to it, but exercise for me was a tool I used to get as small as possible. Oftentimes on the days when I'd work out for an hour, hour and a half, I would also take Luna for a walk around UNL's campus for, 30 minutes to an hour. And it was just that relationship I had with it was not healthy. And I think that's where something can be healthy but not actually be healthy really comes in. Exercise is healthy. It's a healthy habit. It's great to do, but abusing exercise isn't healthy. And that's not something that you can really do long term, because for me, I noticed like my hair was super thin, my nails were thin, my body never fully recovered. I mean, if you think about it, you're working out 7 days a week. When is your body actually like growing muscle? I just feel like I never got more toned. I just kept getting smaller because my muscle was never recovering. I was abusing it. It wasn't recovering. And yes, like physically, maybe I was losing weight or I was appreciating how I looked a lot more. I didn't feel physically very strong. I felt pretty exhausted, in all honesty, but I just kept with it because I had such a fear that if I stopped, the weight gain would come back. And that was what really kept me doing that for about a year and a half. Nate and I had gotten married that next summer in August. And of course, before a wedding, we hear all the typical, like, you should be trying to lose as much weight as possible so you can look great in your dress. And I just had that perpetual fear that I wouldn't fit into my wedding dress the day that I went to go put it on. And of course, that fear was not true. I had no issue, but that was just a fear of mine. And my dress is pretty form-fitting, and so my stomach area, I've always been self-conscious of. And it's something that I was like, I just don't want that to look bloated or bad in my dress. And so it was like, well, how many ab workouts can I do? I probably pushed it a little. Well, anyway, so we got married. Of course, like I was totally fine physically. I didn't need to still be so rigid with my workout routine, but it was that consistency that I craved. And so I probably stayed consistent with that until I feel like Nate and I maybe had the conversation that it wasn't the healthiest. And he's always been really good with helping me through that. But what's the most significant thing is that I had actually stopped getting my period for about 4 months. And not having a period is not healthy. I remember being told in high school, like, why wouldn't you want to skip your period? Like, working out should be a great reason you cope with your period, because if you're able to work out enough and be consistent, you can skip your period. And like, in my mind, like, I just feel like people around me were telling me that was a good thing, when I knew, like, especially as I started my education for holistic health training or coach training, that like not having a period is a sign that there's something off in your body. You're maybe not eating enough, period. You're not having enough healthy fats. You're over exercising, especially paired with under eating. Your body's in a chronic state of stress. And it was really what I viewed a result of me abusing my body for way longer than I probably had thought I was, that my period was just gone. And especially if you think long-term fertility, like, it was important to me that I didn't lose that period long-term, right? I think it's called like that orthorexia. There isn't, at least right now, a diagnosis for that, but that's when you're chronically under eating and over exercising, which is what I was doing for about a year, if not more, until that happened. And I took that as a sign that, like, hey, Bailey, like, even though I didn't know a lot about holistic health at the time, I knew that that was a sign that there was something not quite right going on. I also could feel the emotional stress kind of start to pile on. There's a lot going on at this point in time, and I'm not going to get too much into it because it's not related to exercise, but just a lot of emotional stress, a mental stress. I felt kind of like I had the stomach flu all the time for a few months, and that was kind of falling at that same time that my body obviously was under a lot of stress by me skipping my period. And so I understood that at that point, okay, if I'm going to keep exercising, I need to find a balance with it. And in my mind, it was like, well, why not start the 75 hard? And now I laugh at myself because that was such the opposite of what I needed. But I was like, well, I'll just work out 2 times a week. I'll drink a gallon of water. And keep in mind that workout has to be 45 minutes at least outside and 45 minutes inside of exercise. And so I distinctly remember this one day when my whole day was jam-packed and I knew I would have time to work out in the morning. So what I did was I set my alarm for 4 a.m. And by the way, these workouts have to be separated by, I think, at least an hour. And so I set my alarm for 4 a.m. I did a full body Pilates workout on our outdoor balcony as my outdoor workout. I went to sleep for an hour after that. And then I woke up at 7 a.m. to work out from 7 to 7:45 or 8 a.m. And that was kind of the point where I'm like, you have a problem. This isn't normal. That is not normal behavior, which is why I will never really talk fondly about the 75 hard challenge, even though for some people they're able to have a really healthy relationship with it. For me, and I think especially for anybody who's maybe struggled with disordered eating or over-exercising or just body image issues, it's probably not the best thing for you to do. And for me, it was that was kind of the sign. I think I had maybe done it for 24 days or something, and I'm sure I could go back and look. And then I was like, yeah, this is not normal behavior. And so that was when Nate had kind of mentioned something, and I'm like, yeah, I can't do that anymore. And then I really tried to find a better relationship with it. So oftentimes Nate and I would go for a walk in the evening. We walked so much during our time living downtown Omaha, probably over an hour a day. Just exercise, not even exercising. It was just a time for us to catch up, to decompress, and to get some fresh air. He worked downtown, and then I kind of worked various jobs in that stage of life, but it was just really nice to have that opportunity to connect at the end of the day, and we both really love that. I would love to get back into something like that with him in the summer, just because it's a little bit harder when you live in the country, because it's where are you walking to? There's just road, we're just on a road. But even just making that more of an intentional effort, because I really did love that time that we had together doing that. But I would say from then on, my relationship with exercise really shifted. I'm not going to lie, I'm still an exercise 6 times a week type of gal, but I'm going to dive into how I've adjusted that to work with my body and not against my body. Because if you're somebody, who's maybe struggled with that or disordered eating, you could say, well, that's not very healthy to be working out 6 times a week. And yeah, for some people, maybe that isn't. But for me, it's what works, and it's what I found that works. And again, when I kind of explain how I approach that, you might view it more as oh yeah, that makes sense. That's still a healthy balance. And so, yeah, let's jump into it. I've got, let me see here, 4 different kind of stages that I want you to view. So if you have a notebook by you, this might be a good idea to add it in, just so you can do some journaling over these questions I'm going to ask. But first and foremost, you need to find something that you enjoy doing. If you don't love it, you are definitely not going to stick with it. This is something that you can really use as a fun time to experiment. Often we think, well, it has to be going for a run or going in weight training, but maybe for you it looks like swimming, or it looks like going for a bike ride. You don't have to do something just because the people around you are doing it, but I encourage you to gradually introduce exercise into your routine by doing something you enjoy. And this might progress for you. So if you really like going for long walks, well, maybe eventually you start thinking, well, I should run. What if I just did a light jog? You get into running. Okay, then you start enjoying running, and it becomes a consistent part of your routine because you start realizing, well, I can run 3 miles. Let me sign up for some 5Ks. Well, now 3 miles feels pretty easy. Let me do a 5K. Or sorry, a 3K, and then progress to a 5K. And then maybe you end up doing a half marathon. There is a progression that comes, but don't put a time restriction on yourself or limit by when all of these things need to happen. Second, find accountability or find a group class. I really couldn't encourage a group class enough. I lead group exercise classes in my area, so if you know me and you know where I live, I would love to see you at group exercise. Truly, these workouts are intended for everyone. There's modifications, and most classes will have maybe various levels or different modifications for you. If you're like, oh, I don't know if I feel comfortable doing a high intensity workout, we'll start with like the beginner classes. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But what this does is it creates discipline because you know other people are showing up too. This is also a time for you to carve out of your week. This needs to become a non-negotiable for you. And I think especially in the beginning, if you're like, I hate exercise, which we're going to talk about the whole mindset piece, but you tell yourself all the time, I hate exercise. I'm not good at it. I hate exercise. I'm so weak. People will judge me. Maybe those thoughts are actively going through your mind. That doesn't mean that not doing it is going to make it any easier. And I'm going to be maybe a little harsh here because I'm very passionate about exercise, obviously. I should have said I'm also a certified personal trainer and working on my Pilates certification. That's kind of been put on pause in all honesty. But nonetheless, like I do have experience. I have an education. I got my bachelor's of science degree in health and fitness studies in college. Like I really have more foundational knowledge than just personal experience. Again, I probably should have prefaced that. But this might be very honest and brutal, but it's so true, right? If you don't start working out now and you keep telling yourself, I hate it, I'm weak, everybody's going to judge me. Okay, if you continue to just not do anything, is anything health-wise going to improve? I can confidently say no, it probably won't, right? This is when you need to tell your spouse, tell your kids, tell your job or your employees or your employer, hey, this is the time I'm leaving today because I have exercise on Mondays and Wednesdays from 5:15 to 6. So I need to leave at 5 on these days. Or, hey, tell your husband when you get home from work at 5, I'm leaving for exercise class. So you really need to make sure it's a priority on these 2 days of the week that you're home by 5 or a little bit after, right? So you can get to exercise. You have to set that foundation or set that boundary with the people around you because they will respect you for that. I can almost guarantee it. Rather than you feeling like it's maybe guilting them or making your issues somebody else's, you have to understand that you prioritizing moving your body should be important and it should be an important piece of your life. But say maybe you don't have exercise classes in your area or you're like, I can't just drop my kids off somewhere because there's nobody to watch them at that time. Okay, then put them in the stroller, take them for a walk, right? Some of the best conversations I've had with people is while we're walking because you're not so focused on the conversation. There's something about the action of moving your body that just opens up such meaningful conversations. So if that's what your exercise looks like, that is totally fine. But make walking something you do 5 times a week, right? It's not saying you need to go out and just be exhausted when you get back, but do some sort of walking then every single day of the week or 5 times a week. Maybe someday it's 10 minutes, maybe other days it's an hour and a half. I really think it's going to balance itself out, but just do it and invite people into that time if you have no other option, okay? Number 3 is to treat it like an experience. So if you're going to an exercise class or to a gym or working out in your home, I think this applies at any time, have an outfit that you feel comfortable in, that you feel cute in. Maybe this is a cute workout set. Maybe you need to invest, say $100 into getting some new workout clothes. CRZ Yoga is the brand I get off of Amazon. They're pretty affordable. You can honestly get a lot of stuff for about $100. I'd highly recommend that. Next, mix your pre-workout beverage. So make it, again, that experience. I talk about this a lot, but do your coconut water, add in some creatine, a pinch of sea salt, and fresh lemon juice, and sip on that on your way to class or to the gym. Again, it's that ritual of doing this. Next, turn on a playlist that makes you want to move your body or dance around. Maybe this is while you're driving to the gym or that exercise class, or maybe it's while you're working out in your own home, right? Have a playlist that is like, okay, when I turn that on, I know I'm going to be maybe transported back to 2010 where the music, that hip hop music was just the best, right? Put together a fun playlist of songs you love. My next thing is don't rush through this. I think a lot of the times I've got to fit this intense workout into a 30-minute time frame. pick a time of the day when you know you don't need to rush. So maybe, for me, I think of, okay, when I want to go for a walk, that's going to be after supper, because most things work-wise should be done by probably 5 o'clock if I'm having good work-life balance. Me recording this at 7:25 p.m., but that's besides the point. That doesn't happen all the time. But again, find a time when you don't have to rush. So maybe that's really early in the morning. That's why I have this 5:45 to 6:30 a.m. class for Pilates and strength, because a lot of the moms that come to that know when they go home, then they can wake their kids up and make their breakfast and get them ready for school. And they don't have to sacrifice that time for themselves. Maybe it's just waking up about 15 minutes earlier, right? That 5:45, getting to an exercise class. Also, have a typical post-workout meal or prep your meal ahead of time. I think a big reason that people might not go to an evening exercise class is because they're like, well, I've got a family to feed. Like, who's going to make supper? Well, maybe part of that needs to be put on your spouse, option 1. Or option 2, have some chicken tenders that you put in the crock pot and you let simmer in some bone broth, and then you put some veggies in there like broccoli and carrots, and you do more of like a roast, well, kind of like a chicken-based roast, or you do like a beef roast. Have some rice prepared when you get home that you can just microwave. Boom, you have a core 4 meal already planned out, and guess what? It was cooking while you were moving your body. And that, of course, that takes a little extra planning, but I think if you're very dedicated to moving your body, you're going to find a time to do it. Next, we're moving into kind of the last piece of this, and that is that you need to stop the negative self-talk. Seriously, it's got to go, and I'm guilty of this too, but telling yourself that you hate to work out is not fixing a single thing. So many people, I just hate to work out. Okay, well, if you keep telling yourself that, are you going to love working out anymore ever in the future? Probably not. It's that negative self-talk. It's that narrative you've created about yourself already before you even explored all your options of moving your body. That's where it all goes back to that number 1. Find something you enjoy. I'm not asking you to work out 7 days a week doing intense weight training, because for some people, that's the opposite of what they'd ever want to do. For me, Pilates and strength workouts have been a huge game changer. I also want to remind you that the biggest form of self-care is discipline. If you don't have discipline, then what can you do to develop some? Okay, this, of course, it brings you back to step 1. Discipline is self-care. And I think it's so hard because I lead such a grace-led business. I have genuine grace for everyone that I interact with on my calls, in my coaching groups. I would never look at you and say, you're lazy, you're not doing enough. Never, because that's just not appropriate, right? But it's like, how do I express to you that discipline doesn't mean that you have like a negative relationship with exercise? You being disciplined to work out 5 days a week doesn't mean that that's an issue. Discipline is a time for you to take care of yourself. Discipline is not pampering yourself with all the different self-care tactics there are out there. Although, yes, that's self-care, that's not discipline. Discipline is hard work, and it's not always easy to show up, but it's so crucial, and it's so valuable and important for your long-term health and your long-term self. Okay? I also want to remind you that you are qualified to show up to the workout class, to take space in the gym. Even if you're a beginner, you really need to understand that everybody in the gym is typically not judging you. Everybody in the workout class is all there to get better. And I think that's something that everybody in the gym could agree on, is that everybody is there to improve. Doesn't matter what your goals are, because they're all going to be different. Everybody is there to improve in some way. So you don't need to be embarrassed. You don't need to be ashamed. You don't need to be frustrated with yourself if you don't match somebody else's intensity, because you're doing what you know you can do, and everybody around you should be supportive of that. Okay, so now I'm going to move into workout forms that have changed how I move and view my body. So for me, I feel like Pilates and strength was really the biggest change for me. I feel like Pilates has become a really big thing right now. And what I do like about Pilates is kind of the focus on more of that, like those tiny little muscles that we don't really think to work. So like inner thigh or the glute medius, and just different muscles that are just ones that may be doing like a squat or a deadlift. Yeah, they're going to target somewhat, but you're not really actively thinking about it. It's really focusing on that mind muscle connection and finding that. So even when you're doing a workout, you're thinking about the muscle you're working. So when you engage your glutes at the top of a sumo squat, you're squeezing and you're thinking about your glutes. And that really makes it feel like you're working that muscle so much harder, which I feel like there has to be something true about that. I feel like every trainer I've learned from has said that when you have that mind muscle connection, that muscle's actually activating and working a lot harder. And at least I know that I feel it so much more. But what I don't maybe love so much about Pilates is, yes, it's very difficult, don't get me wrong, but you're not really like dripping in sweat. You're not, I don't know, getting that heart rate maybe quite as elevated. And that's what I love about strength training and adding in not impact HIIT workouts. I still do solely low impact training, and I'm going to talk about that as well in a little bit. But the strength training where like you just feel like you're getting a good sweat, you're really building strength, while in conjunction with Pilates, you're working on the flexibility and again, that mind muscle connection. So that's why I teach exercise classes where we do Pilates and strength. I also teach functional movement, which is more so building strength for activities of daily living. Highly recommend that if you're new to exercise or you're wanting to kind of get into some strength training but not sure what that looks like. Functional movement training is a great option for preventative health for sure. A lot of the ladies in that class take it and they've noticed how much easier it is to get up and down a ladder, go up and down bleachers, or get up and down off the floor. Like it really is just focusing on those major muscle groups, where Pilates and strength is more of that, like, I don't want to say toning because you actually can't tone your muscles. So like the workouts, and I'm so guilty of saying it, but like the toning workouts, they're not toning. You really have to like build strength to build definition, unfortunately, which I feel like a lot of trainers will say, oh, we're doing this to lengthen and tone, where like, unfortunately, you can't tone necessarily. But I know I've said that in the past. My workout videos have said that in the past. I'm sure I've said that in class before. Something I'm just learning really right now, more about how much we should be working out. And I listened to a podcast on the Skinny Confidential that just like blew my mind and led me to do a lot more research into that all. But that's besides the point. I want to talk about the benefit of low impact training, and that's why that's solely what I do. Outside of, I have started incorporating running, maybe 1 to 2 times a week, more realistically only 1 time a week. Outside of that, I'm like either having a rest day or going for a long walk as my cardio. I don't do a ton of running, but last year I trained for a half marathon and I consistently ran, but that was only because I knew my body was to a point where it was strong enough that it could handle it. So I do solely low impact fitness training. So that means strength training. When I'm in the gym, I'm not jumping, I'm not bouncing around. I think that if your body is already experiencing some sort of inflammation, more specifically chronic inflammation, for me, that was low back pain. I wasn't really supporting my body when I would go and do HIIT workouts, because I was jumping around, I was putting a lot of strain on my joints. So I always recommend, let's start with low impact. If you notice your body's building up enough strength to support that higher intensity jumping, then that's that next step you could take. Exactly, honestly, why I started running, because my body had built up enough strength that I knew I could handle that. Okay, so then let's finish this with talking about how many days you really should work out. And I know exercise addicts won't want to hear this. I definitely didn't want to hear this, but weight training for 45 minutes to 1 hour, 2 to 3 times a week is enough. Outside of that, your body is going to be recovering, and you really want to allow it that time to fully recover. One way that you could maybe get around this is if you are going to approach it like this. So on Monday, I'm going to do an upper body workout. On Tuesday, I'm going to do a lower body workout. On Wednesday, I'm going to do cardio and core. On Thursday, I'm going to hit upper body again. On Friday, I'm going to hit lower body, and then I'm resting on Saturday and Sunday. That would be one way where, yeah, you could probably find like a decent balance with that. But If you are a beginner, 2 to 3 times a week of strength training is enough. And I never wanted to hear that. It's still something I don't really want to hear because I would say I've been pretty addicted to exercise for a while. Again, I know I said I work out 6 days a week with a variety of different things, but I know deep down I don't need to be doing that much. It's just really hard for me not to because that is my hour in the day when I just move my body. And I'm very intentional about how I move my body. And so it's something I love to do. Although, yes, maybe it sounds like a lot to someone. For me, again, it works. And that's something I'm sure I'll still need to be working through actively. But knowing that you can do 2 to 3 times per week and that's enough, but that doesn't mean that you're just sitting around the rest of the week and waiting for your body to recover. You should actively be doing things to properly recover or actively finding ways to stay active. I guess that didn't really make a lot of sense. But anyway, finding ways to stay active outside of that time. So looking like going for a 10-minute walk after every meal. Post-nourishment walk is what I call it. Not because you need to burn off the calories you ate at lunch, which is what my past self would have told me, but because it's going to help with digestion. It's also a way just to keep you moving, can regulate your blood sugar levels. So do a 10-minute walk after breakfast, after lunch, after supper, or walk during your lunch break or after supper. Find again that time that it works for you. But that doesn't mean if you're strength training 2 to 3 times a week that you're just not doing anything outside of that. You still need to actively be moving your body if your goal is that long-term strength, that long-term really health, and if you want to start seeing changes with the scale or seeing changes in your body composition. Okay, so when we work out past the point, so I gave the example of me 7 times a week, an hour to an hour and a half of working out, your body reaches a point where it plateaus. So it really can't do anything else outside of what it looks like right now. If your goal, and this would be a superficial goal potentially, but is to chase that 6-pack abs, but you are working out 7 days a week for an hour, your body's never fully properly recovering. So the muscle that you're breaking down and trying to build up, you're never really letting it fully build up and rebuild. A, because you're not properly nourishing your body, or B, because you're not recovering long enough or for long enough amounts of time. That just thought that we tell ourselves that we need to work out for an hour every single day is just not valid. Especially if your goal is weight loss, that doesn't mean that's what you need to do. There's so many different options, but just understanding strength training is going to be that firm foundation. Outside of that, cardio comes in just to keep, your heart healthy, burn some calories. But again, really where you're going to notice the difference in body composition is going to come from strength training. I know that I talked about doing something that works for you and that you enjoy, and that's always where I would recommend starting. So start with something you enjoy, maybe that's swimming, and then I would consider adding in some form of strength training as you progress and start to become consistent and create that discipline with it. So then lastly, what does proper recovery look like? So creatine for me has been a big game changer. You can also get creatine in red meat. So if you eat red meat, you're also getting a source of creatine. For me, I supplement with creatine. No, it does not make you bulky as a woman. No, it does not make your body retain more water so that you always look puffy. For some people, maybe if you're taking too much or you're not taking it with food or at the right time. But I personally haven't noticed anything like that happen. I noticed much more of a change in my body composition during my cycle, during my period, than I do if I was taking creatine. This has really been a game changer for me and my body's ability to recover. I know if I don't have it, I feel totally depleted in energy, and my body just never fully, gets back to where it was maybe the day that I had worked out. So I love taking creatine. I take it in place of any pre-workout or collagen. Of course, that is my decision. If you have found something else that works for you, that's awesome. Next is to take a warm shower after your workout to let your body and your muscles relax. If you have lavender or eucalyptus, that's a great thing to help your body kind of de-stress. But then if you are looking for like muscle soreness, doing some peppermint, mixing that with some coconut oil and rubbing that onto the area that's sore can be a really great way to help with that recovery. Another thing would be like an Epsom salt bath, and doing that, to help your body detox. And it's just supposed to be relaxing. Again, like a lot of recovery just comes down to relaxing, and how can you really like give your body back the minerals, which salt would have, like that magnesium source that your body would need to help rebuild and have energy, that you can actually get from that salt and by soaking in it. For me, I personally don't do any cold plunges. I just do a facial cold plunge in the morning, but I know for other people that has been a crucial part of their recovery is cold plunging. It's because it allows your skin and your muscles to really constrict, and then when you get out or you enter like a warm shower or sauna afterwards, they can dilate. And that process is supposed to, again, help with that rebuilding. For me, I don't do cold water plunges because I follow more of the Ayurvedic vision of, if you are at childbearing age or you are wanting to increase your fertility or wanting to have kids in the future, keeping your womb warm is something that I value. And so I eat mostly warming foods. I also don't try to fully submerge into cold water. Again, going back to Ayurvedic medicine, doesn't mean that has to be the case for you. Do your own research, of course, do what works for you. And if you're past that stage of life, of course, that's going to be a great option for you just to help with recovery, especially if you have high levels of musculoskeletal inflammation. Another one is to get enough rest. So prioritizing sleep. Women, we need 9 to 10 hours of sleep. Most of the sleep studies you've seen were done on men to show that they need about 7 to 8 hours of sleep, whereas there's a more recent study done on women to show we actually need more of like the 9 to 10 hours. So prioritize that, block that time in, and add in some red light therapy while you're laying in bed, or red light glasses if you're watching TV can be a great way to just help your body, again, relax. If you're going to bed and you notice, okay, when I exercise right before bed, it's really hard to fall asleep, that would be because your cortisol is elevated, kind of shuts off the production of melatonin. So not saying that you have to work out early in the morning, but I would really recommend sometime throughout the day before that, like 6 o'clock time frame is going to be ideal, just so you can be sure to get enough sleep so your body properly recovers. Okay. So if you've listened to all this and you're like, okay, I would love to start getting more into Pilates and strength, I would love to try out some low impact workouts, I do have a subscription platform called Balance. I'm going to link that in the description of today's episode. If you follow me on any social media, you'll find that link in my bio. Balance has over 65 workouts, and I'm always adding in a new one monthly, along with a new anti-inflammatory recipe and a new wellness-related blog post. So, is sourdough good for me? How much should I be exercising to lose weight? Different trendy topics I write a blog post about, and then it's shared exclusively on there. Along with, I want to say there's probably over like 40 recipes at this point on there as well, all anti-inflammatory and low impact training, of course. So if you're interested in that, you can, join monthly, join annually, totally up to you. It's something that I have utilized a lot to find workouts that are low impact, because that can be really hard to find on YouTube, or find a Pilates and strength workout that I actually enjoy. That's low impact, I should say. Not saying that I just am obsessed with my own workouts, but I have found, obviously, if I'm creating them, I'm probably going to prefer that style of training. And a lot of what I share on there is what I lead in my in-person exercise classes. So if you're hesitant to join in person, maybe starting on Balance would be a good option, just because you can do it anytime, anywhere, all virtually or online. So I will share that in the description. Obviously, no pressure to join, but if you're looking for something, that might be a great option for you. All right, so let's go ahead and close today's episode in prayer. So dear Lord, just thank you for the weather you've sent our way. I ask for maybe a pause with the rain as farmers can get into the field, but also that you could just continue to bless us with that moisture all summer long, and that people can just work a little less hard outside and trying to keep everything hydrated, especially like farmers and those gardening, and that we're able to just have an abundant crop this year. Lord, I ask for safety for anyone working in the fields, planting corn or soybeans, and that you just keep them safe. I pray for whoever is listening to this podcast and that they're leaving feeling excited and energized to start their workout, maybe journey or maybe change what things look like just a little bit, and really find something they truly love and want to come back to every single day. I ask that this episode just really connects with them or with someone who really needs to hear it. Lord, I also pray for JB and her aunt, who is currently fighting stage 4 cancer and going through chemo treatment. I just ask for peace over her family and her aunt, and that throughout this journey that they just hold so close to you and just have that faith that there is something good that's going to come out of this, even though right now it might feel so overwhelming. I also pray for BV and her boyfriend and her and their plans to get married and talking about marriage, and that they just really feel guided in this season and supported by those around them. I also pray for TP and just all those teachers who are trying to finish this year feeling productive, but also the kids who are growing anxious for summer ahead, and that they just continue to learn and enter the summer feeling really good about how this last school year went. Lastly, I pray for BK and that she just continues to gain weight for recovery and that her lab work continues to look good. And really, I just pray for anyone struggling with disordered eating or eating disorder or a really maybe difficult relationship with exercise or their body, and that you just put so much peace over those women or men that are struggling with that, and that they are able to find what works for them and find a way to support their body in the best way. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. All right, so if you're interested in following along with my life outside of the podcast, you can find me at Nourish with Bailey on Instagram, TikTok, Lemonade, YouTube, all the things. I post mostly on Instagram, and that's probably the best way to connect with me. That or Facebook, which is just Bailey Seaton. But with that, I will talk to you again next Wednesday. Bye.